Welcome to another episode of Boardgamer Strategy Guides, and in this episode we're going to consider Gaia project. Now specifically in today's episode we're going to be taking a look at the Ivits faction, which is a more advanced faction, a few peculiarities to how they work, but they are probably one of the highest scoring factions. So let's dive in and see what sort of strategies we can use whilst playing Ivits. Let's start by taking a look at the Ivits faction board. Now it's a very unique faction because they start with their Planetary Institute on the board. They're the only faction to do that. And rather than making lots of federations, instead they just have one federation, and every time it gets to a multiple of 7 they can take an action to claim another tile. They're very good at developing their economy, and they have this unique ability at being able to put space stations down. Now these space station tokens, you've got 6 of them. You can put 1 down each round, so you're guaranteed at least 1 Federation token. And you can use them to connect empty spaces. So you can use it to connect different sets of planets and really try and build on expanding this one massive empire or federation across the board. And we'll have a little look later on at how we could use these. Next up, let's take a look at the tiles. Now if we put these into categories from left to right as most important, on the far left, that is the most important tech tile. It's all about building up the power level, which is all that Ivits are about. Second, as most important, perhaps we might want to also give some consideration to economy. We really want to build up a good economy, because if you've got a good economy, it means you can build more buildings. So if we've got all these pluses to our economy, that will make it easier to build a good building system. Get lots of buildings out on the board. We might want to give consideration to the one with Gaia planets. It's just not always advantageous for us to use Gaia planets, but in some cases it might end up being useful. And then finally, as we get into the later rounds, we'll want to take these so we get a big push towards building up our strategy and building up our knowledge right on the end of the game. And of course we don't want to forget the 7-pointer. If we take a look at our advanced tech tiles, well, this one here is the most important one to Ivits. You want to get this at the end of the game. It's going to give you loads of points. It's going to give you 5 points for every federation. So if you imagine you've had about 4 or 5 federations, that's going to give you between 20 and 25 points. Secondly, we want to also consider getting the ones that give us points when we pass, or give us points just for having buildings, but especially this one for Federation tokens when we pass. That's just going to be a real key to being able to get a high score with Ivits. Sure, all these other ones are going to do good for us, they're going to help us with economy, but they're really secondary choices. Now looking at endgame scoring tiles, the buildings in Federation tile is so good for Ivits, because that's all they do. They just build buildings in one Federation. You're almost always going to win this if you're playing Ivits, and these other two, such as buildings or different planet types, they will be really helpful. You've got a very good chance of winning them, but really that's the key. The key is federations. If you've got these tiles out and you're playing Ivits, you're definitely going to have a good score. Now moving on to round scoring tiles, it's tricky to say which is best, but especially anything where you can put out buildings, such as putting out mines. Of course we want the Federation tile one out. We want the terraforming one because we're going to build on everything. And of course we definitely want to get both of our academies out, so that's a mandatory. We want to see at least one of these come on the board if we're going to pick Ivits, and that will really be helpful for us getting a high score. And really anything to do with building, so even if it's building trading stations, that'll be a really big boost. If we're going to put them on order, ideally we'd like to see them looking something like this. We don't want our academies too early, and it's optional really if the terraforming one comes out, but ideally we want to see things looking pretty natural, as they would be like that. Moving on to round boosters, our best round booster will be this one here, that gives us 4 points for every academy and Planetary Institute. As you can imagine, we've already got our Planetary Institute out, so that will be a guaranteed points. Anything else, because we're going to have so many buildings out, anything that gives us points when we pass, as well as giving us a little boost with income. And then after those choices, we'd be wanting to look at any of these, such as ones that could give us additional range or maybe a little bit of additional terraforming. That will definitely help boost our economy. But this is the one we want. Moving on to our tech tree. Ideally, we want to get our income and also our science going. If we do this, this will really help us with building out the federations. That means we'll want to do terraforming so we can get the federation token, and it will also mean we'll want to do range so we can get the lost planet token. This means we can connect our different sets of planets to build up that federation. If we go into the end game, we will want to get the QICs so that we can take these QIC actions to get bonus points, and that will really help us to get a high score. But in what order should we do it? Well, let's take a little look. Ideally, we won't get it perfect, but we would want to be looking at doing them in some sort of order like this. Getting stage 4 of both of our incomes, then we would do our terraforming. After our terraforming, then we will do our range, and as we go into the end game, then we'll do our QIC. And then finally we'll get up to the end of both of those income tracks. But the big main event is planets. How do we build a massive federation? Well, we know we've got our orange and our blues. We know that. But this is what we ideally want to be looking for. If you're playing Ivits, you don't want this empty space. You want to be seeing planets connected. If planets are together, it saves you having to try and struggle to build out or using satellites, which is very expensive. It's a whole QIC. And we do that by placing out all of these space stations. That's how we want to connect our planets. So really, we're getting one big, massive network of planets all connected by these space stations. That's what we want to be doing. Of course, we're going to build on everything. That's what Ivits do. Also known as the swarm. They just build on everything. But what we want to do is really connect all of these main planets. Next up, let's consider where do we want our tech tiles. Well, we know what we're going to be developing with our income. So of course we want our incomes there. That's a great place. We want to have some flexibility with our other ones, such as our power tokens. We know that we'll be terraforming later on. So if we've got this little bonus, then we get 2 for 1. And then of course we want that 7. And at the end of the game, we want to be able to get that big push of knowledge with our QICs. So with such a powerful faction, who would be a matchup? Everyone! Every single faction will be a good matchup against Ivits if you know how to play against them. So how do you do it? You've got this faction that takes over everything, so you need to cut them off. If you see they're going for something, even if it's expensive for you, you cut them off. If you cut off their reach across different planets, they're going to have a terrible game. You can absolutely ruin their game if you do that because they can't expand. So there we have it. That's how to play the Ivits. Those are a few basic strategies, a few little tips and tricks for when you're going to give them a go. Probably one of the most fun. If you enjoyed this video, please drop us a comment below and let us know what you thought. And especially if there's a specific game you'd like to know some strategy tips and tricks for, then please put that in the comments below. Take care. See you on the next Boardgamer episode.